two ordinances included in your packet to essentially make an exception for the open container laws if they obtain one of these permits. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this item.
Okay, before we go to questions, though, in our agenda, Bill, this is a 5-step process. 5 things need to get voted on. So all of us keep that in mind. It's a fairly lengthy agenda, Bill, and I will need some help, assuming council wants to adopt these items. Someone will need to give me ordinance numbers for items 2, 3, 4, and 5. Just a heads up. Council, what are your thoughts? Are you interested in approving this recommended action? Tom?
What have our local business owners said about this?
So there's been a committee that's been meeting with business owners in the chamber and the West Central, the economic development, the organization. So they've been talking about this for a while. And then we have actually received one application for somebody who's interested in doing this. We're anticipating that there might be some interest in the business community. We don't think we're going to get like overrun with tons of applications, but this is a pretty common practice that other local governments are doing. So we wanted to be prepared. And the other thing is it also provides us a great opportunity to kind of test it out during COVID times. You know, as you know, we've designed a downtown like 2nd Street specifically to encourage outdoor seating. So right now, like this is a way to kind of test out how that might work in the future for maybe more permanent kind of situations.
And Tom, I've been participating in the regional COVID task force phone calls for some time now. And there are a lot of business owners that are in that group, and they have definitely expressed an interest in having outdoor availability and working with the city to try this out because of their concern that as the weather gets colder, they can't accommodate people still inside their location potentially. Like if it's a restaurant and they're operating under an approved plan from Central District Health that's limited their capacity for seating. And so I think what they're hoping is that they would be able to put up some temporary structures and heaters and set up tables and be able to still earn their living, so to speak, serving as many customers as they can in a reasonable manner outside their business once the weather gets colder. And so there's some issues that each application will have to work with people if the council's interested in us pursuing this concept. It'll be, and Michelle may have already touched on this, I had to step away for a quick second. But, you know, it depends on where they're at and the width of the sidewalk or, you know, proximity of the parking or whatever it is they want to propose to us, they want to try to use. So we'll be, you know, problem solving and coming up with the best way to respond to their requests in a manner that still allows for ADA accessibility and parking and all of that, but allow for some creative uses of the outdoor space to support our local business owners.
Yeah, and I might just also add, in our current city code, we allow outdoor seating as an administrative approval. So that is something that our city planner currently looks at. It just doesn't specify if it's public or private ground. And so based on, you know, you've got all of these different code sections, and there were some conflicts. And so we really felt like this is just kind of an easy, clean way of defining a process that's kind of specific to these times.
So are all of these going to have a like a mandatory site sketch or some sort of a plan?
Yeah, so they would be required to have a site plan. You know, they obviously need like sanitation, hours of operation, They still have to comply with all kind of state, like local, state, and federal regulations. So there'll be a review process. They need to meet ADA accessibility, things like that. So that's kind of why it's going to be kind of a case-by-case basis, depending on where it's located, and if they can kind of meet all those standards.
And they'll still have to go through any kind of approvals if they have a liquor license and they're expanding, their footprint or however that's going to look for serving alcohol. There's still that review process in place and approval. So, and that's why there's the two ordinances there in the packet having to do with allowing the open container within a designated place in the public right of way if one of these applications ends up having an alcohol license, but it's not suspending the open container law for the whole city or anything like that. It's just in order for us to address that alcohol service, we do need to amend our current alcohol code. If that's of interest to the council for responding to requests from restaurants.
Justin looked at this, or?
Yes, and I think he's on the line if you have any questions for him about it.
Sorry, Tom, I missed what you asked.
Yeah, I was just wondering if Chief Williams had looked at this and just kind of, and I'm not saying that this is going to be a street party and all, but if there's issues for officers entering a building because there's now a thing set up or a fire.
Well, to answer your question, we've talked about this extensively here in the last couple of weeks, and because those are concerns that I had in any suspension of the open container. Anytime we have an ordinance, I'm typically not in favor of suspending an ordinance and deviating from that. However, in this particular circumstance, as long as there's an appropriate process that's in place and that the appropriate personnel gets to review that and we determine exactly where it is that they're going to be and it's within those specific confines, and we do have that review process, I feel comfortable with moving forward with it and then addressing it as those issues arise. Because as you know, originally upon my arrival here, the open container law would be suspended during the 4th of July, and we have not done that since I've been chief. I'm not in favor, as I said, of typically doing that. However, we vetted this process. Michelle and I spoke at length last week about this. We've spoken with Bill about it. And being able to put that in the ordinance, creating the ordinance that ties to this specifically, it makes the process creditworthy and reliable and unbiased because there are multiple people that have to be involved in this particular process. So in short and a long answer there, yes, I'm aware of it. I do support it as long as the process is in place and that those that are overseeing those particular areas have the input.
Thank you all very much.
I might also add that did contact the alcohol beverage control at the state level to ask what kind of things that would need to be done to be able to extend their footprint. And their answer was that as long as the city had something in place to allow it, they would not have a problem with it.
Yes, Joe.
Melanie?
So thanks for those questions, Tom. You hit a couple of mine there too. I guess one of the things that I'm kind of trying to visualize it, I guess. And have we thought about how much sidewalk footage they have to have in order to utilize this? Because it seems to me like this really would only work for very few people at this point. Not that that's not valid, though.
Yeah, so they would have to have at least 48 inches of clearance around the seating area. That's the ADA standard.
Okay. And then, I mean, obviously we're going into the winter. Have you has Kurt weighed in on this as well with all the sidewalk clearing and, how that would work?
Right, and that, yeah, so he has, so that's part of what the application process does, is when they submit the application with the site plan, it would get vetted to police, fire, parks, public works, kind of all of the relevant agencies to be able to review and comment and make sure all of their respective issues are addressed.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Mike?
Yeah, I think Tom and Melanie, excuse me, both asked some very good questions and helpful. And it seems to me, if I'm reading this correct and understanding it, that the intent here is to try to help businesses, which seems to be where we're coming from, right, Michelle?
Correct. Yeah, that's the idea, is to help businesses during these times.
Yeah. So Bob, yeah, if we have an opportunity to help our businesses weather this storm a little bit better, even if it's only incrementally, I'm absolutely in favor. And I appreciate the diligence that Michelle and has taken with, vetting this with Chief Williams and talking with Kurt and Bessie Joe, reaching out to ABC, et cetera. And obviously there's been a lot of thought put into this. So thanks for taking that approach, everybody.
Thank you, Mike. I agree. Lots of due diligence, which is much appreciated by council. Colby, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think everyone's asked some good questions, and the questions that I had as well. I guess my concern is what this looks like into the future, and the decision-making process on who would get to use this. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what spaces that could even possibly, use this, and what does it look like in the summer? What does it look like if things go back to quote unquote normal? Are we now opening the door to long-term overtaking of sidewalks and public parking spaces? I guess what are some of the concerns on long term? I appreciate the short term and with winter approaching, we need to figure out everything we can to help, especially restaurants, make it through the winter. But I'm a little bit more concerned about the long-term implications if this is a permanent change. Can you speak to that?
Michelle and Annette, what's your thoughts on that?
Sure.
Very good
So
question.
the idea behind it is it's supposed to be, it's a revocable and it's temporary. So it's up to 180 days. If there's any issues, we have the ability to revoke the permit. So it isn't necessarily a restaurant, for example, applying to utilize a public sidewalk in perpetuity. That would be kind of a different process and code change that we would need to put in place. So I sort of like that it's temporary because it gives us an ability to try it out. The reality is we have businesses that already utilize some of our public spaces without permits. So it's also a way for us to kind of correct things that may not be correct. And, they may not be always maintaining ADA accessibility or things like that. And so, so this is kind of a way to legitimize maybe some things that already exist or have existed, and then kind of test the waters too, to see if we want to create more of a permanent approval process or keep it as something like this where we just evaluate it season by season.
So I guess I understand the 180 days for the applicant and for the business to use that space, but the underlying ordinance, et cetera, would be a permanent change, correct?
Correct, and the underlying ordinance links back to this permit process. So it's basically that revocable encroachment license application. So it's not necessarily, while the code becomes permanent, it still links back to a temporary permit.
Which may or may not be issued next summer, depending on the COVID-19 situation. Is that correct, Michelle? It would have to
Yeah.
come before
Yeah.
council.
But who has the ultimate say on what applicants get approved and what applicants don't?
Well, I
Your
think,
staff.
well, yeah, so the staff would be reviewing and preparing all of this, and I don't recall the answer to this question, but I asked it previously in our internal discussions. If we're entering into an encroachment agreement with the, I think the staff would be authorized to sign the permit, the encroachment permit, but I don't know if that's something that Bill thinks would have to come back to the council to approve. But I think if they met the basic requirements in an objective manner, like there's no subjectivity policy issue about it because the council has agreed to the policy at this level, then the staff, signing off on a permit, like a right-of-way permit happens all the time over at Public Works. I think that's allowed.
Yeah, and Annette, I can speak to that. So basically, it's like an administrative approval. That's sort of what this falls under. And so there's a number of those things that are allowed under the code where the staff has the ability to approve or deny. There's also an appeal process that's outlined in the code. So say, for example, a business makes an application and the application is denied because it doesn't meet the specific criteria, then that person has the ability to appeal it to the planning and zoning and then ultimately the city council. So any administrative decision actually can be appealed to the city council, to P&Z and the city council.
Got it. And what's the proximity of the business to the public space that would be utilized? Is there a distance?
Well, I think there would have to be like a nexus that it's the idea is that it's sort of adjacent to the public space. So it could be the sidewalk. It might be an on-street parking space. For example, I think people have utilized those in the past when they're trying to do like pickups for retail or something like that. They've utilized parking spaces. It wouldn't apply to areas on our state highway because that's a whole separate jurisdiction. So it would have to be businesses that aren't located along our highway.
Thanks. I'm still just trying to envision, the multiple interpretations of this and what it looks like. I guess, yeah, that's a good one with the, curbside pickup. Is that part of this application need to apply to designate a curbside pickup parking area for a business?
It would give that business the opportunity to make the application. Because in some cases, as mentioned, it may be that the sidewalk's too narrow to have a pickup location because otherwise it would block ADA accessibility and pedestrians. So it gives the flexibility by just saying it's the public right of way. And that's how the other communities in the state have managed it. And then the specific proposal will come from the business to say, are they utilizing the sidewalk or a public parking space or something like that. That's why it's hard to make it really specific because the proposals might be different. But yet there's kind of some basic criteria and standards that all of the different departments and agencies have to adhere to. So those are the kinds of things we'd be looking at, you know, as mentioned, like snow removal, ADA accessibility, compliance with all of the ABC rules, those kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure. I guess, I mean, a public right of way is like, it could be up to an entire street, could it not?
That's not really the intention of this. It's basically to utilize kind of the adjacent space, public space around the business to help with their operations. So like street closures and things like that, we have other codes and processes in place for things like that.
Sure. Like I said, I'm just kind of kicking this around, trying to figure out what it looks like long term. I see the value short term with our current crisis happening and the need to help businesses. I still just am not feeling super comfortable with a long term thing on this. And I know that we have the 180 days per application, but that is, someone could reapply and turn their 180 days into 360 days, etc. And yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one, and I guess it is one tool to be able to help out businesses, but I feel like it's very few businesses would benefit from it, considering like what we have for sidewalks and public right-of-way space unless we can open it up where they could go out into the road and go beyond the sidewalk. Is that something that is a possibility?
It doesn't, I mean, it says right-of-ways, so it doesn't get specific about it. I think there's some other conflicting code sections that we'd have to look into in terms of if it was actually creating some kind of closure. And so those are the kinds of things we'd have to look at depending on the specific proposals. Because they still have to be able to meet like all of the city codes and the fire codes and alcohol codes and all of those other things.
Sure, but I mean, like that's the reality. There's like not too many businesses that could comply with all of those codes and function. Restaurants, I mean.
Well, and I think there's probably some alternative ideas that are out there that aren't specifically related to this. We've seen in other communities where they've, you basically get 10 to 12 restaurants that utilize a public parking lot and set up tents and set up tables spaced around. And those are ways for those businesses to be able to serve in probably areas that don't have sidewalks. So I think that there's probably opportunities for us to look at alternative ways to assist businesses. This is just the kind of the one way to do it, and it creates a process and allows us to have the codes to allow, especially for those restaurants like that want to be able to serve like a beer out on the sidewalk or something. We currently don't have that ability anyways. And when you think about like something like Second Street was specifically designed to encourage outdoor seating and things like that. So this is kind of a step in that direction, but there's still that kind of safety permit in place that's temporary and revocable.
Yeah, maybe the banks will start serving beer. So with that in mind, like if someone had a proposal that seating required, for instance, if like the bars that have sidewalks in front of them wanted to just have an open, extend their business outside their doors, I mean, is that something that would be possible?
Again, we would have to like see the specific proposal and then make sure that it meets. There's some pretty specific rules around, and Bessie Jo's probably more of an expert about the ABC rules, and Justin, so I can let you guys speak to that about those, because I'm not as familiar.
Colby, in response to that, basically what we're kind of looking at with this is not just the sidewalk, it's some of the areas are parking areas as well. And they're talking about possibly putting up a tent and the heaters and things like that to be able to protect people from the elements. So if they do that, then absolutely they would. For ABC, they would not have to have seating. They could just set up a particular bar area. And what Michelle keeps alluding to, and it's very difficult in this particular process, is while there's a process in place, it depends on what that particular business is asking for. And answering your question, could they have a stand-up bar? Absolutely. They could apply for that. There is no rule from ABC that says they have to have seating. So, for instance, a particular location that serves food and serves alcohol, and we own a parking lot that is adjacent to that, and they want to use sections of that parking lot and take up parking spaces to erect a yurt or a tent with heating supplies and things of that nature and serve beer and alcohol in there per ABC. They don't necessarily have to have seating. It would have to go along the fire codes to determine how many people are in there. Do we still have the ability for fire trucks to come through? Do we still have ADA parking that's available? So there's quite a few aspects in that would have to be considered with each particular application.
And I think also including CDC regulations, because that'll be a part
Right,
of
what they would do in the short term. But in what you're speaking to in the long term, Colby, you've asked some very good questions about that and what it would do to the long term. And I believe that's intuitive for the long term, and that it behooves us as an organization to look at that in the long term and see what ramifications it would have and unintended consequences or unintended benefits down the road as well. But the process has been established where many of us, I know Nathan has input on it for the ADA and the parking aspect. I have input for the ABC, for the alcohol, and for the parking as well. Garrett has input, DeYoung has input for the fire, Bessie Joe has input for the business license. So there are several of us that have to do that in the process, and then we make our recommendations from there.
Bill also
Sure.
posted in the chat that he wants to more restriction to put it in the process. For example, no more than 2 consecutive, something like that. So you could look in the chat window.
Bob, I have one question as well when you're ready.
We're ready. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure Colby was done first.
Well,
Oh no, you go for it. I got more questions. I'll keep asking away after you.
Oh, okay. Well, it just brought something up in my mind in terms of like a couple of businesses that I'm aware of that their entire front parking area is public right of way, but if they're not allowed to cordon that off in any way, then they have no ADA access. So would this be a potential for them to maybe reserve those 1 or 2 parking spaces in front of their entry to preserve ADA access?
Melanie, I can probably answer that unless Nathan is on the line. If
Nathan's
there
here.
is a particular, hey, there he is. If there's a particular location in which they are blocking off parking spaces to be used for this, and it does take up the ADA, we will have to, before it can be approved, we will have to be able to find an alternate location that meets those ADA standards, or that particular location that they're requesting will have to be moved somewhere else.
Okay.
Is that right, Nathan?
That's correct. When we're dealing with public parking lots, so if there was an application to place seating or some kind of facility to help the business, sales tent, whatever it may be, in an ADA parking space, we'd have to make sure that we could accommodate an alternative ADA parking space location. With respect to businesses that are utilizing the public right of way, their ADA access stops at the property line. So the parking space in front of their business is not their ADA parking space. That's a public parking space. Now, if they have a private parking lot where they would want to use that, they would have to find an alternative ADA parking space. So I don't think that issue would be would prevent necessarily someone from applying for this permit, but it might make it difficult for us to approve it if we couldn't make sure that ADA access was being maintained.
Well, and the only reason I ask is because I know of a couple of really old buildings in town that are like very close to public right of way where they may have some parking in another area, but it's not ADA compliant. The only
Right.
ADA compliant is that front entry right off the front. But if they can't maintain that parking, then their clients don't have that access. So it's really kind of an interesting quandary, and this seems like it could provide some relief for that as well.
Yeah, I think, part of this is really just creating a process where we have to look at all those aspects. And right now we don't necessarily have a process. So I've looked at this, and there's all kinds of equity questions when you look at, are you utilizing public space for the benefit of an individual business? But in these times and in this effort to try to think outside of the box, as well as test the waters to see what's helping local businesses, I feel very comfortable in a city engineering role as well as a public works director role to be able to vet the concerns. And if we have issues and challenges with ADA accessibility, they're going to come right to the forefront, and the challenge will be on that applicant to resolve that. So.
Okay, well, I mean, it sounds like there's hope anyway.
Yeah, I would think it would be challenging for staff to feel comfortable that it met those thresholds if a proposal was directly blocking ADA access to a business. That just wouldn't even fly. I mean, we'd have to say you have to address that concern before
Well,
we could approve that.
And I think the actual problem is that, in these particular areas, other people take that parking so their clients don't have it. So
Yeah.
they never actually truly have ADA compliant access.
Right. Yep. And there are a lot of buildings in town, including some public facilities, that don't have that ADA accessibility.
Yeah. Well, okay. Thank you.
Colby, you had some other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the parking issues or the parking concern could be an issue in the longer term. If you venture out, the reality is most places don't have enough sidewalk to accommodate a table, and the potential to kind of venture out into the street parking area, start seat up parking spaces, and in the argument for the person that would want to do that versus the person that has a public parking place right in front of their business is like, well, they're able to take up X amount of public parking spaces. Why can't I? And I think that's where the inequity would start to come in. And I think this is more long term, but I mean, I don't know what other solutions we have to try to help businesses. Just thinking of what restaurants could even utilize this, there are very few, and what else can we do for those places? How can we help them?
Yeah, so we kind of have an umbrella of ideas, and this is just one, so that basically the businesses that want to utilize have the ability to make the application. They currently don't have really a process to make an application. We also we looked at a number of other communities that are doing this, but we kind of modeled ours most closely after the city of Ketchum, just because we felt like, it's pretty similar in terms of the issues with the highway going through it, relatively narrow sidewalks, and those kinds of things. And so far, they really haven't had any issues with this. But again, Colby, as you're saying, you're thinking kind of more long-term, and I'm a planner, so I always think long-term. But the thing I feel comfortable about is that it's revocable and it's temporary. And so, as I think Bill Nichols said, maybe the solution is that you can apply up to 2 times, and then we can evaluate this process and decide if we want to make something more permanent or not. I think the reality is we do want to encourage outdoor seating because it's creates kind of a vibrant downtown, and it's fun to go to a community where you see people sitting outside and enjoying the place. So we need to make sure that we have kind of the right tools in place if, for example, maybe they're not able to utilize that on their own private property, especially in places I think, that we've specifically designed for that kind of use, to try to create more like interest on the street itself. But again, I think there's some discretion here, and we're going to do the best that we can. And like I said, anybody who doesn't like the decision has the ability to appeal it to the governing boards too.
Thanks. I think I have most of the questions answered. It would be nice if we could have some sort of review mechanism in place for after the winter, pre-summer on this. And that's my concern about permanently changing ordinance.
So I'm happy to bring back in 180 days, I'm happy to bring back kind of a review of the businesses that made applications and the results for the council to look at. The ordinance itself, the open container ordinance, that is a permanent change. You always have the ability to change back that code if you don't like the way that the results of this effort. But I think in the interim, the ordinance change is necessary in order for your chief of police to feel comfortable with providing this option for businesses.
And Colby, one other thing we could do is if we start getting applications and approving them, we can always include a description of those in like the monthly department report or something similar to how you get a list of all the new business licenses that were approved by the clerk's office every month, that type of thing. We can certainly include information in your packet that lets you know what's happening with this program.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm happy to include that in the department report. I mean, I hope that businesses take advantage of it because it was a lot of work to put together. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be able to do something for sure in these current times. I hope there's some other ideas that come up to help some of the businesses that aren't able to take advantage of public parking spaces, et cetera, to be able to keep running their business. So hopefully everyone's continuing to work on that. That's all I got.
Okay, this is Bob. I'm going to suggest that we capture Annette's comments about department reports. And I think Michelle was following that and was agreeable to that. I also think we should capture that sideboard that Bill suggested, no more than 180 days without coming back to council. I think those are good safeguards. Make sure it just doesn't become a forever kind of decision without council oversight. And I think with those safeguards in place, Michelle, I think, and Annette, there's interest in getting this going and learning from it. Like you said, there's some communities that have some similarities to us that have made this work for them, and we could learn and perhaps make changes down the road. So I'm going to look for a motion on each of these 5 items. I would like Bessie Jo to give me a ordinance number for item 2, the one-time ordinance number, item 2, suspend the rules and read by title only.
That would be 993.
993. Okay, and that,
I'm sorry, Mayor. Should we make any changes? Because I know it's one spot it says City of Ketchum, and then another spot it's is a site plan attached. I think we should just make that mandatory if that's possible.
yep, good catch, Tom. Let's, where is the city of Ketchum in our agenda, Bill? Which page?
I think the third page.
Third page, so,
The revocable encroachment permit.
Yeah, it's in the very first paragraph, general conditions, A, compliance.
so could we, amend that or edit that and then make sure that someone does a global search on that to make sure it's all McCall and not Ketchum?
Yep.
Yeah, and I should add, this was kind of an early draft of the application, so that's already been corrected.
Okay, and then Tom made another good point about the site plan. Could you give us?
Yeah, right on the encroachment permit, it says, is the site plan attached, yes or no? Can we just make that a mandatory yes site plan, if everybody agreed?
That seemed like a good suggestion to have a site plan for every proposal, just more specific. Would you be okay with that, Michelle and Annette?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's capture that. Thank you, Tom. What is the ordinance number for item 3?
994.
994.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
2 and 3 are the same. 993.
Okay,
And then 4 and 5 will be the same as 994.
thank you, Bessie Joe. All right, let's see if there's interest in going down this pathway and trying these out. We'll start with recommended action 1. Would someone make a motion to approve the revocable encroachment license application form process and authorize mayor to sign all necessary documents?
So moved.
Thank you, Tom. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Melanie seconded. A motion has been made and seconded to approve the revocable encroachment license application form process and authorize mayor to sign all necessary documents. Can you have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sowers,
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes,
Yes.
Mayor Giles,
Yes?
Councilmember Machezik,
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. The next item on number 2 is to suspend the rules and read by title only, one time only, ordinance number 993.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Mike.
Okay, we have a motion has been made and seconded to suspend the rules and read by title only, one time only, ordinance number 993. I need a roll call vote on that, Bessie Joe?
Councilmember Sowers,
Yes.
Councilmember Machezik,
Yes.
Mayor Giles.
Yep.
Councilmember Holmes,
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion carries. Go ahead, Bessie Joe. One time only, ordinance number 993.
Ordinance number 993, an ordinance of the City of McCall, Valley County, Idaho, amending section 5-5-030, prohibition F, open container of the McCall City Code to include section 4.9.19, open containers on public property for permitted business premises of the McCall City Code as an exception.
Thank you, Bessie Joe. So now we're on to action 3. I would look for a motion to adopt ordinance number 993.
Make a motion to adopt ordinance number 993.
Mike, second.
All right, amended section MCC 5-5-030 prohibition of open container to include section 4.9.19, open containers on public property for permitted businesses premises as an exception, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents.
And Mike, you seconded, is that correct?
Yes.
Believe. Thank you, Mike. Motion has been made and seconded to adopt ordinance number 993, amending section MCC 5-5-030, prohibitions, F, open container to include section 4.9.19, open containers on public property for permitted business premises as an exception, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sowers,
Yes.
Councilmember Machesik,
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes,
Yes.
Mayor Giles,
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen,
Yes.
That motion carries. We're on to item 4. I would like a motion to suspend the rules and read by title only, one time only, ordinance number 994.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to suspend the rules, read by title only, one time only, ordinance number 994. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sowers,
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes,
Yes.
Mayor Giles,
Yes.
Councilmember Machesik,
Yes.
Nielsen,
Yes.
The motion carries.
Ordinance 994, an ordinance of the City of McCall Valley County, Idaho, and acting at section 4.9.19, open containers on public property for permitting business premises, to Title 4 Business Regulations, Chapter 9 Alcoholic Beverages of the McCall City Code, to allow open containers on public property for businesses holding a valid revocable encroachment permit issued by the City of McCall to use public space as part of its business establishment.
Thank you, Bessie Jo. All right, council, hang in there. We're to item 5. I'm looking for a motion to adopt ordinance number 994.
Make a motion to adopt ordinance number 994, enacting section MCC 4.9.19, open containers on public property for permitted business premises, to Title 4 Businesses Regulations, Chapter 9 Alcoholic Beverages, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents.
Thank you,
Mike,
Thomas. Thank you, Mike. Motion has been made and seconded to adopt ordinance number 994, enacting section MCC 4.9.19, open containers on public property for permitted business premises, to Title 4 Business Regulations, Chapter 9 Alcoholic Beverages, and authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Sowers,
Yes.
Councilmember Machesik,
Yes.
Mayor Giles,
Yes.
Councilmember Holmes,
Yes.
Councilmember Nielsen,
Yes.
Motion carries. Annette, Michelle, and Chief Williams, thank you for guiding us through this. I think we will learn a lot and look forward to learning more about this. And thank you, Bill, and others for suggesting some sideboards to put in place to make sure that we're cautious and not making problems.
All right, thanks, everyone.
At 8:30, we were supposed to start Stibnite Gold Project. So we're just about an hour over, not too bad. Annette, I think you are in charge of the next 3 items,
Okay.
4 items. I'm gonna turn it over to you and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you so much, Mayor. Council, in your packet is an overview again of the process for the comments for the Stibnite Gold project based on the draft environmental impact statement that was released. And we touched briefly on this at your last meeting, and I had intended to have a draft letter for you for tonight. And so that letter is not done, but I'm going to go over the highlights or the points that I have pulled out of the draft EIS with you verbally and talk to you about what I think should be included and get your feedback. And then I'll have the final draft ready to send out to you and give you plenty of time to look that over and give me any comments. We'll have it on your agenda again, October 8th, for final wordsmithing and approval for the mayor's signature, and it is due to the Forest Service by October 13th. First, I want to say that we're so fortunate to have a mayor that has a professional background in the NEPA process. And he's been very helpful to me in educating me on the technicalities of how this works and what is considered substantive comments by the Forest Service and how to frame the issues in a manner that will be relevant to the reviewers and accord us the most opportunity to have our feedback incorporated into the final decision. And so where we're at with this process is, Mayor Bob, please jump in if I get this incorrect, but my understanding is based on the comments that the Forest Service receives, they will finalize the environmental impact statement, which is typically just make some adjustments to the current document. And if you all haven't seen the document yet, it is very large. And they did drop off a hard copy in the front of City Hall for any member of the public that would like to look at a hard copy instead of the online version. And it fills 2 binders that I think are about 6 inches or more deep. So it is a lot to go through, and I've been doing my best to read through all of it and pull out the relevant pieces for the city of McCall. And so we'll have some feedback to them on things that we think should be in the final EIS. And then based on that, they issue a record of decision, which is the document that contains the Forest Service alternative that they selected out of the final EIS, plus any additional mitigation measures that they determine should be included based on the public comment that they get right now. So the plan is to outline in this letter, again, what we think should be in the final EIS and then what mitigation measures we're requesting they include in the record of decision. The first point I'd like to make is that most of the draft EIS study areas do not include the city of McCall. The city of McCall is mentioned many times in narratives, but no specific analysis for any of these study elements touches the city of McCall directly. And so the very first point we're going to make in our letter is that we believe that's an error because there's an entire section in each of the alternatives except for the no action alternative that talks about how approximately 1/3 of all mine-related traffic originating north of Warm Lake Road would use State Highway 55 through Donnelly, Lake Fork, and McCall. And through McCall, mine-related traffic would generally use Dinehard Lane and Boydston Street. And the reason why, additionally, in the second alternative, which is proposed as the preferred option by the company, I believe, that alternative includes a centralized wastewater or centralized water treatment plant. And if that plant's constructed and during mine operation, that plant is expected to generate 40 more trips related to the delivery of chemicals and reagents for the treatment plant. So we're going to point out that because of the volume of hazardous materials and explosives related to the mine operation that is estimated to travel through McCall in every alternative, and there's no description of whether some or which type of these numerous hazardous materials would come through McCall. We're assuming that all of them could be coming through here. We believe that this route should have been analyzed as they did for the road routes that are in the study areas. And the reason why is we have a number of safety issues and potentially environmental impacts related to that route. First of all, and a lot of this is information you already know living here, but we'll point out for the Forest Service, is that the Dinehart-Boydston route passes through residential areas and then through a populated commercial and industrial area. And we do agree that if this is going to come through McCall, that it would be our preferred route or maybe required route that we would want the Forest Service to require the company to take, because the alternative is to come through downtown McCall, which we definitely, I believe the council agrees with this, but please let me know. We definitely don't want the mine traffic and those chemicals coming through downtown McCall and proximity to Payette Lake, which is our sole source of drinking water. The number of pedestrian crossings and access points creates a lot of potential conflicts for that traffic as well as delay. So it does make sense that it would be Dinehart and Boydston as the preferred or required route. Oh. What the heck?
Be able to fix this, Bessie Joe?
It looks like it's on.
Okay, I'm not sure what just happened, but my computer, and I'm here in City Hall, so I don't know why that happened, but sorry about that.
It was the Teams program.
We got
The
your
what?
back though.
Teams had a problem.
Oh, okay. So anyway, we're going to have a whole segment of the letter that's addressing Dinehart and Boydston from the physical element of the roadway itself, being the intersections with Highway 55, which Nathan and I have touched on with you all before, that those intersections can't handle the traffic in a safe manner. And we are talking with ITD and the company about how those improvements will be made and who's paying for what. And we will be back to council about that. But I am going to talk about that specifically in this letter in terms of if they're going to use this route, that we would like them to be required to use that route and not downtown, and also participate in the improvement of those intersections to ensure the safe turning movements. Additionally, because they didn't analyze this route, they didn't take into account any public health impacts of having shared bike pedestrian facilities along this area and the residential nature of the area. Getting to an environmental element of using this route, the street crosses the North Fork of the Payette River, which is listed under the Federal Clean Water Act as an impaired waterway, or called a 303D waterway. And the regulations imposed on that waterway by Idaho Department of Environmental Quality are so stringent that we can't even discharge our cleaned wastewater into that river. And therefore, we feel strongly that they need to take into consideration any potential impacts that could happen in that impaired waterway if there's a hazardous material spill on that bridge or near that waterway. So I've researched information regarding that to put in there. And the fact that we're not allowed to even discharge treated wastewater in that river is in stark contrast to what they're looking at permitting for treated water discharges into the waterways at the mine project itself. So again, that I believe lends credence to the fact that they should have looked at this one as well. They do look at some of the other portions of our watershed, but they excluded this piece. So following along the lines of the hazardous material situation and the explosives, and there's a long list of these materials that will be potentially coming through. I talked to the McCall Fire Department about our capacity for a hazmat team and what that looks like. And so according to our fire chief, there is no hazmat team in our area, and the nearest one is 4 hours away. We're primarily equipped to identify a spill, issue evacuation notices, and clear the scene, and call for the hazmat team to arrive. And so in our opinion, 4 hours is a substantial amount of time for us to wait while hazardous materials or gases could be in the waterway or in the air around this populated area. And therefore, one of the mitigation measures we'd like to see included in the record of decision relates to providing spill kits or training and materials to the McCall Fire Department or Cascade Fire, whichever one's appropriate, that we would have that response capability much closer in and could service anything that happened within Valley County, not even just McCall proper, but you know, it's a need within the county itself because of that lack of a hazmat team here. And then there's a section around our recreation economy. The EIS talks about backcountry access and that element within the mine area. And so we'll have statements in there in support of keeping that backcountry access open, because our part of our economy relies on those folks that are coming here as a jumping off point into backcountry access, whether that's rafting or hunting or off-road vehicle use or horses or whatever. We feel that that should remain open and accessible. And we will reiterate that we agree with the Forest Service that they should not use Lick Creek Road for access to the mine and that they should use the Warm Lake Road. So we'll have that in there. And so we'll summarize basically that the final EIS needs to include some recognition of this travel route through McCall near an impaired waterway and those conditions, and then we'll recommend in the record of decision that the mitigation measures for the intersection improvements and hazmat response and anything else that you all have thought of that you want me to try to include, that those are the two primary things that we would request the Forest Service require in the final record of decision as a mitigation measure for the impacts to us. And I think that's all I have. Any thoughts, concerns, other issues that you've heard about that I know you've received some emails from some members of the public about things that we should put into development agreements with the company. And I'll just remind you, we're not a permitting agency, and so we don't really have any way to do a quote development agreement, but we have had conversations with the company at this time that are more good faith negotiations on the part of the company regarding intersection improvements, but we really have no legal teeth to force them to enter into agreements with us like that. And So while they have been working with us, I think it's important that we ask the Forest Service to also include it in the record of decisions as a backstop to make sure that it gets done. So I don't know if you have any questions, and thank you, Bob, for helping me with all the research and wording that will go into the draft letter.
Well, it's a massive document. I think you really were careful about how to focus on stuff that affects the city. So we got a good draft that I reviewed with you, and I think it's on the right track. Thanks for going over all those items. Tom, what's your thoughts? You think Annette's on the right track?
I feel like she hit every point that we talked about. Thank you.
Melanie?
No questions, but I just want to let you know that I am thoroughly impressed by all of the points that you've made. I mean, you covered my questions tenfold. And thank you, Bob and Annette. That was wonderful.
Mike?
Yes, the amount of time and due diligence that you guys have done on this and at your presentation is phenomenal. I'm 100% behind you and absolutely appreciate what all the amount of work that you've done thus far. I think you're doing a good job representing our community. Thank you.
Colby?
Yeah, thank you for all the hard work you've been putting into this, and I'm looking forward to reading the draft.
Thank you, Annette. It's a good product. Look forward to the final, and we will proceed. You've got the confidence of the council behind you, and it is a daunting task, so thanks for taking it serious.
Okay, so as soon as I can get that finished, I will shoot it out to you all in an email, and then it'll go go in the next packet as well. And that way, if between now and the next meeting you have any individual questions, you can reach out to me, and I'll try to answer them as best I can.
That'll work great. Thanks a lot.
Okay. All right, so the next item will be really quick. At your, oh gosh, was it your last meeting or maybe the time before, I had given you a reminder that the Association of Idaho Cities is accepting policy proposals from city mayors right now about any legislative bills that you would like them to consider championing. And I didn't receive any concepts from anyone about any particular issue you wanted to have written up. Internally, I pulled the department heads, and the only item that we had an interest in is related to one that came up in the last legislative session related to the definition of utilities, including fiber broadband. So as to, resolve the issue of having to go through judicial confirmation, I think it's called, every time, we want to do something with the fiber utility whenever we get to that point in the future. And my understanding from Chris Curtin is that is already an AIC concept that they're working on, and so we don't really need to submit it again as a city. So if there isn't anything else, I think our role will be more on the responding to the bills that come out related to property tax reform and things like that, that the interim legislative work groups are addressing, and providing information to the legislature about, how those changes may or may not impact our ability to provide service. So unless you all have thought of something you would like brought to the table in that arena, I don't know that there's anything to do with this particular item tonight.
How about reversing legislation on the nonsense short-term rental regulation and maybe giving the cities some ability to regulate short-term vacation rentals.
In the sense of whether they're allowed or not.
Yeah, overturn the legislation that happened, what was it, 4 years ago now, 3 years ago?
Is that something that the council would like us to put something together for the mayor to submit to AIC to consider?
Tom, what's your thoughts on that?
I'd have to do more research on it. I haven't read it recently, so.
Okay. Melanie?
I'd certainly like for us to discuss it. I mean, obviously, private property rights are king in this state, but, you know, they are truly tying our hands in terms of our affordable housing and housing in general. So I do believe that this is something we should be talking about.
Okay.
Mike, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not sure. I have not. I need a little more background, a little more information to have any comment on it.
Okay. So this is Bob. I'm thinking, you know, I think our council is interested and other cities are interested in this, but it's a pretty complex thing, and by September 30th, I'm not sure what
I
we
think-
can, other
well,
than a comment that's frustrating to us, some of that we can't restrict some of this.
Well, I think the proposed language would be pretty easy to write up to, you know, remove whatever paragraph or something like that. I mean, I don't think the bill itself would be very difficult to come up with language, but it's the politics around it that would be tough, I think. And so I believe the protocols of the Association of Idaho Cities, which I put in the packet, that their board will consider whether or not to champion a proposal based on whether it affects more than one city, if it benefits more than one city, if it's within the realm of scope of city government, which this would be, and whether it's politically feasible. So, you know, even if we submit the concept, it's not guaranteed that they would put it forward as an AIC sponsored bill. So I don't think it hurts to reach out to them and see what the appetite is for that topic. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they would take it up. They may respond back to us that it's not the right time or nobody else wants to do it or, you know, whatever. But I can certainly reach out to them and find out.
I think it's a really important item, and I think Colby's right on that you know, we've all talked about it, our frustration, and we know that other resort communities have similar problem with housing caused by that. And we know that certain states have addressed this and had some success. So yeah, it's worth talking to them about. It may not go anywhere, but I think we should try.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath, but sorry I didn't get that in earlier.
Oh, it's all right.
And as far as the other one, getting late, so I forgot. What was the first item we were talking about under this topic?
The fiber utility definitions in the statute.
Yeah, that one I think we definitely want to push on because we're an active player, and I think they would be interested in that rather than having judicial review.
Okay.
You know, it seems like there's a lot of interest and people are proud of the efforts made by communities like Ammon and others. So that would be a logical one.
Okay. All right. Are you ready to move on to the COVID update then?
We are.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you. I believe Justin is on the line, and this will be a fairly quick update as well. So I'll let him take it from here.
Look, I have it on paper, so I shall not deviate.
All right, keep going.
All right, so the council briefing for COVID-19, there is really no significant update regarding the increase or the decrease in numbers locally. The governor held a meeting earlier this week and spoke to the numbers, spoke to unemployment down to 4.7%, which he stated was ranked third in the U.S. at this point in time. The numbers statewide as far as the infections and the deaths has remained about constant. However, they did want to remind everyone that the flu season is coming up and that also fall is coming up, which means we will be doing more activities inside. And so the recommendation, of course, was made for flu shots. The biggest news that we have in COVID is with the Central District Health. They had a board meeting. I believe it was last night or the night before last. There were no changes to the orders, the mask orders for Ada and Valley counties. They remain in effect. For the city of McCall, as you know, the Emergencies Powers Ordinance expired at midnight on September 18th. And we have reverted to the Central District Health's mandatory mask order, which is still a misdemeanor offense. Currently, the city is drafting a new city ordinance to permanently establish the authority to issue public health orders. And we had talked about that previously with the emergency orders declaration expiring in the 18th, that the council wanted us to move forward with that. So that is being done. It will reside within city code. There's scheduled to be a public hearing on October 6th. At that point in time, if council moves forward, it would be pushed for adoption on October 22nd for the time frame. If it is voted and adopted on the 22nd, then it must be posted publicly and would eventually become effective on October 29th. And what that does is it permanently establishes the authority of the city to be able to establish public health orders and implement those. And should the CDH remove the mask mandate at any point in time and the council wish to enact another mask mandate, November 5th would be the earliest date to do so. But as of right now, there's been no movement from Central District Health to remove Valley County's mask ordinance. That was a topic of discussion. That was the primary topic of discussion that they had this week. And it was decided that it would remain in effect. So we're still operating under that guidance. As far as the city goes, we're continuing to operate as we have previously. We've become very, I hate to use the word comfortable with how we're operating at this point in time, but there have been no significant increases nor decreases that have mandated that we alter our performance day to day. So that is the update that we have at this point in time. Should you have questions, I or Annette would be able to answer those for you.
A question for Annette and Justin. Central District Health met Tuesday, as you outlined, and made no changes in the mask order. Did anyone talk to them? Did they tip their hand? Are they looking at maybe October lifting that, since the data is pretty not a new case? Do you have any feel for where they're headed, or do we just have to wait till their next meeting? And are they meeting weekly?
My understanding is they are meeting weekly. And my other takeaway from the meeting earlier this week was a reference to revisiting the Valley County order at the end of October. But of course, they could revisit it at any meeting. But that was the general sense, was that they'd look at it again at the end of October.
Thanks, Annette. Questions from council for either Justin or Annette?
So how many cases did we have in Valley County?
I think we're, according to Central District Health, I didn't look today, but I want to say it's at 88.
88.
Yeah, 88. Which is only an increase of 2, I think, in the last week or something. So we've definitely been successful in slowing that down and yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions or comments from council?
491 new cases reported today.
Yeah, statewide, I believe, is what the cases were.
Yeah,
Yeah, and roughly, according to what the governor had put out on Monday, that I would say it was almost 50% of the deaths have been in long-term health care facilities. And so, as Annette alluded to, this is a topic that CDH does discuss weekly as to where we're at with the mask order and where we're at with any promising vaccine or anything coming down the pipeline.
I think we're ready to go to the upcoming meeting schedule on that. If you could help us with that.
Sure. So a reminder, we'll be right back here again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for your third and I believe last training session with the Planning and Zoning Commission and the county commissioners on code updates with Michelle. And then I think the only other thing I would like to talk to you about on the schedule in October is that you normally would have a Friday work session October 23rd, and you'll notice that there's still no work session identified there. And the reason why is that we have been working internally with the library on the next steps with the library bond project. And as you know, Erin is working on the focus groups this month and into October for a deeper dive with the public, with the voters on that topic. And so we'll be coming back to you with those results, as well as talking to you with the library board about the next steps based on that new information. In meeting with Meg today to plan that out, we realized a couple of things. One is having enough time to compile the data from the focus groups when Erin's done, having enough time to chat again with the library board. Their next meeting is October 15th about planning for the work session conversation with you all. And then the last consideration is that we've had some turnover on the library board of trustees. So there'll be a new member appointment on your October 8th meeting, and then potentially another new member appointment on your October 22nd meeting. And so we both feel that it's important that we get these two new library board members up to speed on this really important topic before they are in a work session with you. And so for all those reasons, I'd like to propose to you that we reschedule October 23rd for October 30th, just push it out of a week if the council is available that morning instead of the 23rd. And then we would still be able to stay on track with the direction you gave us to come back with options for the bond project before the end of the year. And based on the feedback we get from you and your discussion with the library board at this work session, we would be able to work with Humphreys Pulley in the month of November to prepare anything if there are some design changes requested, and still get back with you in December and meet the overall time frame. So I'd like to find out from you if that would be acceptable to reschedule that to the 30th.
Let's pin that down right now. I'm good with that. Tom, you good with the 30th?
Yes.
Melanie?
I may have made a conflicting appointment today, but I'll see if I can work that out.
Thanks, Melanie. Check into that. Mike?
Because that's a window of time between city council meetings, I do have plans to be out of town the 26th through the 4th of November. So I do not anticipate being in town. I'm certainly trusting of my fellow council members to speak on my behalf. It's something that is very important to me and is very important that I'd like to be present for, but if that's the choice, then I can live with it. And it's certainly
Okay.
possible that I could listen in and do it remotely because I do plan to be at my cabin in Joshua Tree. So feasibly I could be attending remotely without much difficulty. So that might just solve that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Colby,
Yep.
good with that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know what tomorrow looks like even for me, so I'd say yes, go for it, and I'll do my best to be there.
Thank you all. Let's do that and then schedule it for the 30th and we'll do the best we can.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your flexibility. Other than that, are there any questions about items or items that you want to see on the agendas coming up that aren't here yet?
I think we're good. I burned up all my brain cells tonight. How about the rest of the group? All right, we're gonna adjourn and I'll see everybody on the screen tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.